You are listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Jurdy. In this week's episode, I'll be speaking with Zoë Freedman of Flow with Zoe. But before we dive into this epic conversation, I'd love you to start out by just taking a few deep breaths, getting grounded, connected, calm, peaceful. Let's take a nice, deep, full breath in. Sigh and just let it out. Take two more like that. Your deepest breaths yet today. One more. I hope already you're feeling better, more centered, calm, and in the moment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're really appreciating and enjoying this content. I've been enjoying all of these conversations with so many incredible healers and people spreading more light and love into the world. In this week's episode, I speak with Zoë Freedman on living a courageous life, facing fears, not trying to avoid them, what it's like to lead a yoga retreat, and the secrets that she shares for making that a success. It might not be quite what you think. And what it's like to find inspiration to create really unique offerings for your students that are true to you, true to your voice, your authenticity, and more. Without further ado, let's dive in.
There's three main areas that I'm super passionate about. So yoga, travel, and personal development and growth. So what I mean by personal development and growth is really just taking a deeper look at how your different ways of being and whether or not those are coming from a place of conscious choice or subconscious habitual patterning, which, science and studies and all of that shows us comes from your early childhood for the most part. And so a lot of us are kind of living in this perpetual cycle of reactions. So these programs running that were built based upon reaction that you had to something or someone or some event when you were a kid. And most of them are based around fear, because most of us are driven primarily by our egos, which feeds off of fear and doesn't like the unknown and etc. So all of that's super fascinating to me, because I think what everyone seeks in their heart is a level of peace, contentment, and a feeling of freedom. But there's all this stuff that kind of prevents us from getting there. So, yeah.
Yeah, so bringing that into your teaching, your retreats, your kind of...
Exactly.
How do you create programs that target that?
So I launched my first one ever, and I'm halfway through it right now. So I called it Fearless Living on and off the yoga mat, but I've already edited the title for the next go around, which I haven't announced the dates yet, but it'll switch to Courageous Living, because I feel, this is the process. So I'm always evolving in the different philosophies and teachings and learnings and discoveries of my life. So therefore my teaching will always reflect that. It's constantly shifting and changing, but usually within the same direction. So there really is no such thing, from what I can see, as living fearlessly, because fears are always going to be there. It's more about, can you have the courage to honor the fears, maybe even see if there's a lesson or something worth looking at in there, but then deciding that that's not going to limit your expression of your life. That's what this series is really about, and we meet once a week over the course of 6 weeks, and it's been beautiful. So essentially the sessions look like we gather, we discuss what shifted for the different participants, if they'd like to share, between the prior session and then our new meeting based upon the lesson or the teaching of the week before. So we just sort of have an open forum, and they're also welcome to ask questions, or we can, comment on each other. And if someone had a really interesting or unique or beautiful breakthrough, congratulating them and just honoring that. And then after that, we shift into the new lesson or teaching, and it's usually a progression of the week before in some way. And then from there, we'll move into our practice, our asana practice, which serves to help us get a feel for coming up against our comfort zones through movement. So that's different for everyone. Some people doing crow pose is terrifying. For someone else, an upward wheel, something very vulnerable feeling, is terrifying. So based upon who's in my group, I tailor the classes to their needs to help them push out of their comfort zone. And everyone who's signed up has entered into this knowing that that's one of the intentions. So they're open to that. And after asana practice, I guide them through a visualization based upon the theme to leave them with hopefully some new tools, some new shifts to kind of take that physical experience, combine it with the mental aspect, the emotional aspect, the spiritual aspect, and see what has shifted for them. So it's been really cool. This is the first time I've done it, so I'm still learning. It's kind of a beta test run, but so far it's been nothing short of wonderful and magical, and getting to just hold this container for them and see what comes through. I mean, one of my girls, she had this huge realization of something that happened when she was 7 and 8 that has been impacting how she acts in one specific way her whole life since then. And she got to let that go and release it. And it was so powerful for us to all get to be part of this space held for her to do that. And it's those moments that remind me of, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is what all the hard work is for, and the self-doubt, when I'm creating this program, right, it's out of my comfort zone. I'm completely practicing what I preach, in that it's like, wow, is anyone gonna want to do this? Is this gonna serve anybody? Do I know enough? Am I good enough to do this? And that's sort of the theme of my entire teaching career, of my life, of probably most people's lives, I would wager, is coming up against those self-doubts and realizing, right, learning that we have a choice, and that we can listen to the self-doubts and let it color our choices, or we can recognize like where that voice comes from. Or if we don't know where it comes from, we just want to recognize it and then choose to keep going. Choose to be like, you know what? I don't know if I'm good enough, but I'm going to try anyway. At the end of the day, I think what's most important is like, just learn. So you try something, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, then you have data, information for what's next. So.
I love that. Yeah, pushing past your comfort zones, and I think taking students through more than just that one experience that you have with them, having them for one yoga class or a workshop. And I think you tend to see students, you create these relationships and you start to learn about their life, but actually creating a space around that where it's geared toward that and you're really seeing that growth. I think there's a lack of that in our, how we're set up right now. There's people might have that at work, or they're expected to do it at home. So holding the space to bring people together for that, I think, is really amazing. And you've done some other really creative workshops. So burlesque, for instance.
Yes.
And I'd love you to share, for anyone listening, like what that, like you said, finding that idea, kind of having that unique idea in your head of something that you want to offer. It might exist, maybe not, but facing the fear of going out and doing it. And how would you recommend someone go about that if someone listening has a similar idea, either for the program you just recommended or you were just talking about, or something else you've done in the past?
Absolutely. If you're thinking there's all these creations you feel within you that want to come out, but maybe you're not clear on what they are just yet, a great way or a great practice to help bring them through is to find or to make sure you're having these moments of creative expression in your life. So for me, when I'm taking a yoga class myself in the studio with a teacher, so many ideas come to me because I'm often in that state of flow where I've sort of tuned everything out. Yeah, I'm sort of listening to the instructor to know what's happening next, but I'm so familiar with yoga that they don't have to say or indicate much for me to get the gist of what's going to take place. So I'm just moving, I'm flowing, I'm tuning into my breath. I close my eyes often in a yoga practice to just drop into the internal place and the sensations. So in that process, I'll have all these interesting or unique ideas waft through my mind to the point where now I've started just bringing a journal to my yoga class and jot the ideas down. And originally I used to chide myself for all the thoughts of like, oh man, I want to be focused just on my breath. My mind keeps wandering. And now I've realized, no, it's this beautiful, like, it's like my mind has turned off. The judgment part of my mind has turned off. The fear-based part of my mind is turned off. And the creative part of my mind is turned on. And then ideas are just there. And it's like you can pluck them like a grape from a vine or whatever, right? You can grab onto it if you want to. And if not, it'll waft away and maybe it'll come back next yoga class. And the days I don't have a journal, I develop this sense of trust of like, okay, if I have a brilliant idea and I forget it, then it wasn't time yet. And when it's time, I'll think of it again. And it's all good. So that's been helpful for me. Another thing that really helped was actually developing a meditation practice and a walking meditation practice. Not everyone is comfortable sitting still and meditating, although I do think with enough goes at it, enough dabbling of the different types of meditation, I think most people could really be served well by having some portion of their day seated quietly, just letting the mind do its thing. But with that being said, walking meditation is beautiful too, and a lot of ideas come to me that way. For a time, I lived in Imperial Beach, and I really loved it. And Imperial Beach is unique in that there's a stretch of beach where there's no more houses. There's nothing. It's just wide expanse of sand for miles. And actually, if you walk all the way, you will get to the border fence of Mexico, although I never walked quite that far because I think it's at least maybe 3, 4, 5 miles. It's a long way. Yeah, totally. And I walked far down the beach many times and I never got close. So anyway, the point is, when you're there, there's no buildings. There's hardly ever any other people. Many times there was nobody. So it's just you and the sand and the endless horizon and the ocean. And so I would just walk, sometimes closing my eyes and just think. So it's moments like that where a lot of good ideas come, and I try to write them down or mark them somehow and come back to them later. And then I kind of go through the sifting process. Okay, here's a great idea. Is that in alignment with what I consider my business offerings to be? What's the mission? What am I trying to do? Because I have so many ideas and it's not really realistic to do all of them. And when I've tried to do so many, sometimes my energy gets scattered. A really good book that I've just started reading, recommended to me by a friend, is called Essentialism. It's incredible. And it's all about the power of doing less and having what you're doing be of the highest service, of your highest service. So just asking yourself the question, like, what is my greatest contribution? And is this action in alignment with that? Essentially. Essentialism. It's a really good book, and I'm only like 3 chapters in. It's already impacted me a lot, so highly recommend the first 3 chapters at least. So if you're not sure what offerings to have, start finding creative expressions and outlets and time to quiet the conscious mind, quiet the ego, and quiet the fear mind, which is probably also the ego, and find a way to drop into the lower brainwaves of alpha and theta to access your subconscious and to just clear whatever normal kind of toxic buildup is there that clouds your vision. So hopefully that makes sense. If you already have some ideas, it could be that you are dealing with a lot of self-doubt or fear of, especially if it's something you haven't seen before. Take that as a good sign, as this is what you're meant to bring through, and it doesn't exist yet because you're the one to create it. And that's beautiful, especially within the yoga and wellness community, when there's a lot of people doing similar things. Having something new to offer is not only refreshing for the community, but will also bode well for your business.
Going back to the idea of having this spark, this intuition, the seed come to you in your yoga class, your meditation, that, oh, wow, like you envision this great offering, and you work with a lot of partnerships and things like that. So what is it that you look for in a partner? Like if someone kind of gets this idea and maybe they're not sure, do I do this on my own? Do I do this with someone? At one point, do you bring someone else in? Or does that typically, like if there's a partnership, is it happening that, oh, you guys get the spark together and then from there, okay, let's dive in and develop this and bring it to the community?
Yeah, so actually this is a great question because I have so far in my yoga career experienced a wide array of situations within this realm. With my aerial burlesque dance workshops, which are a ton of fun, that was co-created with my partner and good friend, Amy. I can't even remember exactly how it came about, just that as we became friends and deepened our friendship, we noticed all of these similarities in our interests. We'd both briefly been in burlesque dance companies before. We both loved to dance. We both also teach yoga. We both also taught aerial yoga and loved aerial yoga. And on top of all that, we both felt and feel passionately that everyone, but in particular women, could use more forums where they felt safe and free to embrace their inner goddess or to feel sexy. And not to say that dancing or aerial or burlesque is the only form to do that. Absolutely not. How people feel sexy and really tuned into that inner fierceness that exists outside of fear and doubt and the context you were born into, it's going to be different for everyone. And actually, this is completely a sidebar, but I'm exploring how else to offer that to the world. So the aerial burlesque workshops were sort of how that began, for me at least. And now I'm realizing, okay, that's a beautiful offering, and some people really resonate with it, and they love it, and they come every single time we have one. But there's a lot of other populations where that doesn't appeal to them for whatever reason, and I still want to be able to reach those people as well, those women as well. So coming soon will be some offerings that are within that same realm of creating this safe space for creative expression and to just feel sexy and powerful. They're not here yet, but stay tuned for that. Anyway, so that collaboration has worked beautifully, and it's always been Amy and I working very much together, bringing equal pieces and parts to the table. I've had other collaborations where, in retrospect, I was much too quick in my excitement and didn't always really consider if that was the best fit. And I think it really comes down to anything. There's people in your life that feel like home, that feel invigorating, and all of these positive high frequency vibrations. But then there's still these parts of us, and for everyone it's different. For me, my spirit animal is a hummingbird. So I have all this energy all over the place flying around, and I want to say yes to everything and do everything. And part of my self-growth journey has been learning to be more discerning, to take a breath, to really think about it. And I had one partnership go wrong this year in particular, and it was completely my fault. I just had too much on my plate and didn't have the courage to say, hey, I can't do this. I don't have the time. And just, I don't know, lived in a fairy tale land that the pieces were going to fall into place with minimal effort, and they didn't, and it didn't work out well. And I still feel bad about it. But the point is, you have to be, my lesson, I should say, is take a bigger breath for maybe a little bit longer, especially living in this age of receiving a text, for example, and feeling like I need to respond so quickly. And oftentimes, even in a casual setting, like social plan, someone's like, hey, you want to go on a hike at this day and this time? And I'm like, yeah. And then 10 minutes later, I'll be like, dang it. I actually don't think I want to do that day. I should have taken longer because I'm trying less. I'm practicing keeping my word and having more integrity. And so having to go back and be like, actually, no, I don't love having to do that. So now I'm trying to simply take more time before I even respond. But anyway, so when it comes to partnership, sometimes it might feel like a natural co-creation, and that's great. And if that feels like a solid fit and you've contemplated it in different moods, I think too, is really good. And then this feels solid. Go for it. And if you find yourself sort of frantically seeking collaborations because you think you should be doing that, then maybe check back in. What is your mission? What is your intention? Coming back to intention and a mission for things is so key. And I know it's not a new concept whatsoever, but it seems to still be, at least in my life, one that I so easily stray from. So just a friendly reminder to whoever's listening to this, doing anything throughout your day with intention, even coming over here to do this podcast with you, right? I had this moment where I was like, oh, when I said yes to Heather, like, why did I say yes? And so I checked in with myself and I was like, well, first of all, I really love Heather and I've never been on a podcast before, so it'll be a new experience for me, and it might be a really fun way to see what comes through. So just checking in with that intention before I arrived. But sometimes I don't do that with things, and then you kind of get there and you're like, what's really happening? So when it comes to creating something with a partner, checking in with the mission, the intention behind it.
Sometimes communicating that intention. So the intention's there. Maybe you don't know that the partnership is even out there. Like, for instance, for the new year, I had Mandy Burstein here on the podcast, and we were talking about the new moon and the power with intention setting. And it planted the seed for me that, hey, I want to offer this kind of setting for people. This is something I want to do. This is a space I want to be able to provide. There's so much opportunity for this. I don't see one of the studios I'm working at offering this. This would be great. We were at the time also trying to offer more workshops. So I got that light bulb, it went off, and I, communicated that to the studio owner, not thinking there was a partnership involved. I was just going to do this on my own. And then she came back to me and said, oh, actually, Angela had a similar idea and she wanted to do that. So it brought us together. And then that workshop was so much stronger because she had hosted something like that before. She had some really amazing intention setting techniques that I hadn't even thought of including. So bringing us together, we had the same intention and we didn't even know we were both out there with this idea of what to do for our community. And then it just created this great bond. And now we're going to be doing that moving forward every quarter around the different natural elements. So spring equinox, we have one coming up. So that sort of, blossomed without me even thinking, the intention being, I need a partner for this and I need to do this. So I think things can really evolve out from so many different directions. And,
absolutely. Yeah. And on that note, going back, because now I remembered something else that I was going to speak to. Mm-hmm. I can only speak to my own experience. And in my own experience, my default is I need another person. So part of my journey has been, do I need another person? Or is this something that is my dharma that I'm meant to create, and to come back to trusting myself, trusting my own expression, and trusting that other people the people who will flow to it were meant to be there. So that's why it was super powerful for me to create the 6-week Fearless on and off the mat series and just do it myself and not have a co-lead on it. Last summer, I led a yoga retreat in Belize by myself and felt very strong and powerful in that. And the whole time I was there, I didn't find myself needing a co-lead at any point. Perhaps a secretary, or not a secretary, but someone to set up the props in the morning might have been nice. But aside from that, it was amazing to do it on my own. And that was incredibly healing and powerful expression for me, because I had been through a super traumatic breakup just a month and a half prior to that. And so I was there leading this yoga retreat by myself for the first time. It was my first yoga retreat. And I didn't have a family member. So this upcoming retreat in March, my mom is coming on. So it'll be her first retreat. I'm really excited. So and she wanted to go to the one on Belize, but the timing didn't play out that way. But I'm glad in the end, because it was such an experience to be there leading this retreat by myself, not having an assistant, no longer, existing from the context of being in a cozy relationship. About half of the retreaters were students of mine, and the other half were friends of those students or students of the studio I teach. One of the studios I taught at, but hadn't actually been to my class. And so there wasn't any one person on that retreat that was, a best friend or someone I'd known for years. So essentially, I was completely on my own, and it was so magical what we were able to create. So that was really profound for me to learn that I do have these abilities and that I can just come back to trust. So collaborations are incredible. You learn new things like you were just expressing, and you can vibe off of each other. That's what I have really well with my aerial burlesque co-lead Amy. When we create the dances, we just have this creative flow with each other. And it's beautiful. And then there's other offerings and things that I want to create that completely make sense for me to do by myself. So if you're in that space, yeah, just checking in. What is your intention? What is your mission? Do you have that natural creative flow? Or as you were speaking to, it could be someone new and you're exploring. And so then you can kind of check in with like, what is there to lose? Right? I mean, doing a 2 or 3 hour workshop once about a subject that I would say is very accessible to give out, not a ton is going to go wrong with your co-lead, as long as you're both wonderful humans, as I'm sure you are, versus, you know, if you haven't yet explored having that flow with someone yet, you're going to lead a yoga retreat together. That might not be the best forum to discover how that goes. So I think you can also weigh, what's at stake, if that makes sense too. So yeah, alone, together, all good.
Yeah. And what about, so now you've been doing these multiple times, like you said, people will be coming back. So I imagine the first time you're hosting something is always going to be the hardest, especially if it's something new to the market, new to the scene, the studio. So yeah, I guess what is your advice? Like if it's your first time to stick, would you like stick with it? Try different times, days, because I can imagine that can be a little deflating if you put your heart and soul into this workshop and you host it for the first time and it falls flat, or,
Totally.
it takes a time or two until it actually builds steam.
Yes. Patience is key, especially in this modern age we live in, where we have access 24/7 to see the highlight moments of other people. So you can hop on Instagram and see, for example, if you're a yoga teacher, you can look at someone's profile that seems to be killing it. They're leading multiple yoga retreats, teacher trainings, and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. I just tried doing this retreat. I only had a workshop, only had a few people, or maybe nobody. And so then you feel all these different sort of low vibes, let's say low frequencies, negativity around that. And so it's important to come back to remembering patience, right? What you saw, what you're seeing from those people on social media is such a tiny snapshot. And it's a snapshot of their success, which is beautiful. But they probably didn't post on there, the low moments, or they didn't talk about the retreat that nobody came to. They didn't talk about the self-doubt. And some people maybe do. And there are people definitely worth following on social media that I think will work harder to speak to the full capacity of what it is to be an entrepreneur, the ups and the downs. And I definitely seek to do that myself, and I'm exploring how to do that even more impactfully than I already have been, because I've found when you talk about what you're struggling with, it opens up a form of vulnerability much more often than the high moments. The high moments in photos get all kinds of likes and definitely comments of inspiration, but talking about when you're struggling and also allowing people to contribute to you makes you feel more human, I think, through this social media forum. So that was definitely a tangent, but
No, I think that's really important to point out because, you can get really, I think, overwhelmed looking at those people or even their practice. If you're a yoga practitioner practicing, I have new students every week in my classes, and I make sure to, emphasize, I'm going to give you options. I'm going to put that out there for the person next to you that's been practicing for 12 years. Their practice is going to look entirely different from yours. I don't want you rushing into that pose, trying to get your handstand the first class because you think you're strong and this and that. Like, you have no idea how much practice that went into that person to get that pose. Like, don't rush it, and I think, it's a fine line with, feeling like you can communicate. I mean, I went through similar, like a time in my life. I was going through a breakup. One of my best friends died. And that was kind of at the height of my yoga content production. Like, I was doing yoga challenges and I wanted to take beautiful photos and aesthetic, and I loved it. Like, I loved the creative expression. I've always been into photographing and storytelling in general. I kind of talked about this on the podcast. I come from a journalism background, so whether it's photos, videos, audio, I love storytelling. But I hit this really rough point where I'm like, wow, like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I can't find inspiration, but I think I just took that one day at a time, and I try to communicate that. Like, today, this is how I'm feeling. It's not great. But yeah, I think that's kind of a sensitive line to walk as a yoga teacher, because we've been going into our classes, when you're going through something like that, how do you hold that space? It's tough, to hold that space, to go in as a container and a channel and provide a healing environment for people when maybe you're healing yourself, but I think being able to speak from experience, now I know if there's someone that is in my class that's lost someone recently, or they open up to me that they're going through a breakup or that time, okay, I've been through that. I can speak to that. So yeah, I guess finding that line of being vulnerable and sharing and knowing when it's time to open up, but then also to, okay, now I'm here to provide that space. And that's kind of tricky.
It's a beautiful dance too, though, because through vulnerability, you can foster much deeper connections with people, because we're all sort of walking around, I think, at least a lot of people, with this idea that we're bad, we're doing it wrong, other people have it figured out, other people, right? This constant look at how the world is going. And the truth of it is first of all, there is no one truth. Everyone has their own truth based on what they've been exposed to and experienced in life. What I was going to say is the truth of it all is that everybody suffers. Everybody has high moments, right? No one's getting through this life without being challenged or confronted. And it's through those challenges and confrontations of life that you access these deeper parts of yourself, that you're given the opportunity to ascend, if you're open to it, to a higher level of consciousness, to being a more free version of yourself, to releasing the shackles of societal contexts and trauma and whatever else may be there for you. And so I think holding the space, whether it's in a yoga class or a retreat, with the energy of come as you are with everything. This is safe. You are not alone in whatever it is you've gone through. Maybe your specific experience is different from mine or the other person's, but together we're all humans and have, a similar range of what can be experienced and felt and lost and gained. And when people feel truly safe and accepted for all of that, that is when healing and magic and connectivity really comes through.
I love that. So beautifully said. Is there anything you've learned from, you have hosted a yoga retreat, you have some coming up. Were there any learnings from that first retreat that now you're kind of putting into place, and that now you're looking forward to this retreats you have coming up and that you're planning?
Absolutely. First of all, travel is my soul. I just love it so much. And I knew from a young age that I wanted nothing more than to go and explore the world. And I had a lot of beautiful opportunities to do that, and still more ahead. But my emphasis for my life the past year, and probably the next year moving forward, has definitely been building my business, Flow with Zoe, and discovering what offerings I want to bring forth through that. But anyway, so prior to this, though, I've explored many, many places, and as I got deeper into the yoga journey and teaching, it felt natural to combine the two. And I know how nervous a lot of people get around travel, and I've learned that my willingness and excitement to explore other places and plan the trips myself and do the research myself, that's within my comfort zone. And it isn't for everyone. And so it's been so wonderful to recognize that I can be a guide for people to journey out of their comfort zones in this way that's within my comfort zone. And my journey out of my comfort zones has been in other ways. So anyway, when it comes to retreats, what I've learned so far is you can only prepare so much. Things you cannot imagine will happen. And the practice of being present is what will make your retreat successful or not. Operating from this is what's happening right now, and letting go of what I want to happen, what should be happening, just what is happening and what is the response that I need to have or want to have or will be useful to have. So on my retreat in Belize, there was an incident where one of my retreaters had lost her husband very unexpectedly, and he was supposed to come too on the retreat 2 months prior. And when you teach people in a yoga studio, I often only know them through the context of that class. Maybe we chat a few minutes before the class, maybe we chat a few minutes after, and then they're practicing. So unless I've spent time with that student in a different environment, I don't actually know them that well. I know their yoga practice and teensy facts about them, but that's about it. So it's hard to know when people come on the yoga retreat what they're coming with, what they're bringing. And all you can do is create a safe space for that. Well, what I've learned, and I'll get into the specifics in just a moment, is for a successful yoga retreat, you want to be present, right? Not worrying about what should be happening or what you want, but what is happening. And then also having a relationship with the retreat center where you feel very confident that they are this extra level of, if you're doing it at a retreat center, of course, there's different iterations of retreats, but for anyone doing it at a retreat center where they have a staff, have a manager, people on site, knowing that they're solid or that they're organized, that they're there as a partner to you is so useful, because what ended up happening on my retreat was this woman was just suffering so much, and she had contemplated not coming on the retreat, and we left it up to her. We told her she could have a full refund if she didn't want to come, or she could come. It was just completely up to her. And so she chose to come, and I think she wanted it to be easy and comfortable and healing, but when she arrived, it just was a lot for her. And so there was some unfortunate instances of abuse of substances, and that would just make it unable for her to join in with us on like tubing down the river or practicing yoga. And to say I was unprepared to deal with that is an understatement. And what ended up making all the difference for me, for her, for the group, was the retreat center and their staff. And they just went above and beyond to help the entire situation. They monitored her in that, we were worried, right? What if she wanders off alone and trips off of a rock? Because we're like deep in the jungle here, so there's plenty of things that you could trip on if you're under the influence of a substance. Even if you weren't, honestly, it's just an added hazard. So the retreat staff would have someone like every half an hour kind of walk by her cabin just to make sure she was good. And sometimes they would hear her crying and would go and ask her if she needed anything. And I'm not even kidding you. I think every single person on the staff at this lodge sat with her and held her hand as she cried at some point over the retreat. It was so beautiful. They just showed up because they're just these amazing humans who honored that she was going through a really hard time. And there was no judgment. There was just safety and care. And that was it. And it freed me up to be present for the rest of the retreat group, right? Because I was by myself. And then the other retreaters kind of took that energy, took the cue off of how the retreat staff were treating her. And then they were doing that as well. And it was beautiful. And then long story short, the retreat center staff were so worried about her that they wanted to do some big gesture to help her healing. And so they ordered the national tree of Belize. They went and ordered it from like a nursery or something in Belize. And on our second to last night, had organized a tree planting ceremony for her husband. And we all sat around, and the manager said some words and then left it to her to say whatever else she wanted to. And we all held hands, we lit candles, and then she had this place she could go the rest of the retreat to honor her husband and to cry and to grieve. And she was there a lot the rest of the retreat, honestly. And if she ever travels back, that tree will still be there. And now she knows that this place in the world has a special spot for her husband. And I mean, what? Like, so what, you can't predict that something like that will happen. You don't know how someone's going to react, right? It could very well be that someday I have someone in a similar situation and on the retreat that isn't how they behave, right? You just never know how someone's going to cope with something big and what can happen. So I guess my advice for retreats, and this isn't meant to scare anyone. If anything, it's meant to let you know that just stay present and try to trust yourself and try to trust those around you, and know that it's going to be okay. If something's not going well, that there's going to be a way for it to be supported. Other tips would be schedule time for just you, because you're holding space the whole time you're there for your group. So you want to make sure that there's a few hours at different parts of the day, even if you need them for prep, but that you're not meant to be somewhere else simultaneously or like rushed, but also having a few hours just for you to regroup and to enjoy, because it'll be tempting. It's fun being on the retreat. It's fun hanging out with the retreaters, and I wanted to be on the different excursions with them every day when I wasn't teaching yoga or we weren't having a workshop. Everyone was free to choose. It's actually a really cool setup in Belize. You could go hiking or cave tubing or seeing ruins or horseback riding through ruins. I mean, endless zip lining, endless adventures. And I had been there before, so I'd already done some of them and was able to recommend things based on my experience to my group, which was great. So, I wanted to be with them all the time because I loved it. But I recognized that it would be good to also have some time to regroup and to settle. So one of the days I actually went on an excursion by myself. And that felt really, really nice. Mind clearing. And a chance to just kind of release the energies of the collective and then come back in the evening for our next round of yoga refreshed. So yeah, that's a great tip, I think, is making sure you have time for yourself. And trying to anticipate what people's needs or questions might be is also useful. But I think a lot of that just comes with experience. So I can give you all the tips in the world, but if you're planning on leading a yoga retreat, just know that it will be clear to you what you need to learn or to do or to implement after you've done one. I mean, yeah, you can prep, you can listen to all the tips, but it just really takes experience. Some things you just have to get out there and try. So
yeah, and you're the second person to come on and talk about, the benefit of working with like a retreat center, for instance. And I can say from personal experience working and doing a retreat, not at a retreat center, we found this beautiful Airbnb in Joshua Tree. I still love the space. Since we've done it once, I feel I could do it again if I needed to, but the catering was all on us. There were no on-site staff, and it was two of us leading the retreat, but we were also doing the meditations and the yoga and holding that space and doing everything. So I think definitely working in a space, you're going to pay a little more per retreater, per person attending. But if you bake that into the cost of the retreat, it's going to be a higher quality experience. You're going to have those, people on the ground helping you, especially if it is something you're doing on your own. I think that is really important, that you have on-site people to help with and know the food is just there. It's all there. And the staff are on-site to help. So you have that extra set of hands. And yeah, I think that's a great point.
absolutely. I loved working with that retreat center, and I will be going back there. I don't think this year, but probably next. Definitely in the future, because right now I'm trying to explore different places and different opportunities. And so the next yoga retreat I'm really excited about is in March. I think we have 2 spots left as of a few days ago, in Tepoztlan, which is this ancient healing town, a pueblo mágico, a magic town, Mexico. Their tourism board designates different towns around the country that are just magical in some special way, and this is one of them. And it's known for having a lot of yoga and wellness and healing. And so I'm really, really excited. And same thing, we're working with, I have a co-lead for this retreat, Margot, who's wonderful. She owns her own yoga studio in Tijuana. She's actually the one who found this retreat center. So we're really excited. And so far, the staff there and our communications with them are wonderful. And she's actually working with them to plan out our menu. So they're going to do all the cooking, but she's like designing the recipes, because she's an Ayurvedic consultant. So it's going to be all Ayurvedic meals, which I can't wait to eat. Oh my gosh. But yeah, the next retreat I'm doing though after that in June, most likely, I haven't announced it yet, is going to be not a retreat center. It'll be renting a home, a lodge kind of place that I know the owner of. If that one pans out, that'll be my first experience doing one without a whole staff or without someone else cooking. In fact, I actually am hoping to hire my sister to be my chef, because she's a brilliant, oh my gosh, brilliant chef. She's a linguist by vocation, but I think a lot of us are thinking someday she might end up switching fields, because she's just so gifted at it and she would love it. She's already been like, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. So if you end up coming on that one, you can meet her. But so it'll be interesting if I come back on the podcast to recount the difference between those two, and if I have any tips from that. Because yes, I can already anticipate, based upon what I've talked with you about and just comparing in my head what it's been like to work with the retreat center, all those little things you don't think about, right, that people might need, that when you're at a lodge with like cleaning staff and cooking staff and all those incredible humans that do these little things that take up time that you don't always think about. So we'll see how the June retreat goes. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
Yeah, and I think having someone on site focusing on the food, that I think was the biggest learning for me. We had worked with outside catering, but it meant having to pick up the food at a certain time. So if our schedule went off, like for instance, one of the meals was sitting there a little longer and it's all super fresh stuff, it's vegan, it's raw, and you know, the stuff, if it's sitting there, it's just not as fresh. So having to have all of that on point, and then in addition to leading the stuff on site, having to go off site to go get that stuff, because it was this small, you know, mom and pa local vegan shop that didn't have delivery, that couldn't drop it off. It was like, oh man. So if you at least have someone on site that like the food is their thing, okay, good. You know, at least that's taken care of, because that's, I mean, keeping people happy. They're doing yoga, they're working out, they need to be eating.
Yes.
And so food is a huge aspect.
I think it's a huge aspect of retreats in general, because nourishment is something that the average person, honestly, I think stresses about on a daily basis, right? And that can be from different places. So for some people, it's financial. It's like, okay, I'm busy. I'm running from point A to point B to point C. I haven't cooked anything recently, though, so that means I'm going to need to eat all these meals, but I don't want to spend a ton of money, right? So there's a whole dialogue around that. Or there's the dialogue of like, okay, I'm vegan, I'm gluten-free. Where can I go that has this? Or there's I'm going to cook and prep food for the day, but what do I want to eat, or what is going to stay good? Am I going to have access to a microwave if I need that, or to a fridge, right? So there's all this inner dialogue around nourishment on our day-to-day. For some people, that going on a yoga retreat, I think a huge component to relaxing and enjoying it is the food, is the nourishment, and that fact that you don't have to worry about it. So it's a really important part of a yoga retreat. It's
true. And that's one thing that I loved about my 300-hour training, is it was an intensive in Quito, Ecuador. I actually had the Iris on the show last week, and she was talking about the program and how she created it there. But one thing I loved about it, I was vegetarian at the time. So it was interesting to see people that weren't vegetarian faced with this vegetarian diet for the first time. Like, how do I feel, you know, and snacking on nuts all the time to get their protein and feeling good, like nourished on this vegetarian, which is in line with a yogic lifestyle, and experiencing that for the first time. But I loved that, you know, but it was interesting. So you're not having to think about your food. I knew I could focus my time on studying and learning yoga, meditation, everything. But there's this like pressure that builds up, like, oh my God, my next meal, it's going to be, I'm so hungry, and, you know, but you're not worrying about it. But then it's also out of your control. So this thing that you're used to controlling in your day, especially I think a lot of people in yoga, they're looking at all areas of their lifestyle. So like you said, they might have a certain diet restriction, things like that. All of a sudden now this is just taken care of. But I loved on the site there, it was this woman in her family that would literally prepare every single meal for us. It was in the traditional style of Ecuador. And so we got to taste the style of food from that country, which to me, I also love to travel. So getting to experience that culture and the tastes of that place. So we got to try this. She'd always have this really good salsa and agua fresca that she would prepare. And it was different every day. And you didn't have to think about it. And I think it did definitely get people out of their comfort zones. And it takes that having to think about nourishing yourself throughout the day off of you, but it also becomes a very important component of having that be good and nourishing and having people feel satiated at the end of the day with that healthy food as well. And snacks. I think snacks are key, having good healthy snacks around so that in between the meals, some people are used to eating bigger meals than others. So when you're setting up this set meal, having some extra things on the side, the nuts, the fruits, things that people could just kind of snack on, I thought, became really important as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I both crave and enjoy going on yoga retreats, participating in them myself, and enjoy offering them to people because, oh my gosh, it's just this all-encompassing nourishment. I mean, I guess it depends on the yoga retreat, but the ones I've been on and the way I approach leading them, you're getting nourishment from every possible avenue, right? You have deep connection with other people, which we crave as humans to feel we're part of a tribe. And the word tribe gets used so often these days, but it is such a beautiful word in its essence and its origin and its meaning. And that is what the retreats I've been on, that's how I felt about the people there. I felt like we were part of this tribe together, and that's what I seek to create on my yoga retreats. So you have that aspect. Connection and true vulnerable connection, because the yoga retreat, people who want to go on yoga retreat generally, in my experience by default, are open to being vulnerable and open to holding space for other people to be vulnerable. And then the retreat leaders, then are tasked with helping to foster that safe space to do that in. And so you get this nice deep connection that might even feel deeper than what you have in your regular everyday life. And then you have the nourishment with the food. So your body is satiated, and most retreats I've been on and seen usually have vegetarian or vegan menus and meals, which is wonderful and delicious. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, although I eat meat on a very infrequent basis because I prefer a more vegetarian approach. But because I like to travel and have all these different people and influences in my life, I also like to be, if someone invites me over for dinner, I prefer when they ask me, do you have any restrictions, to be like, no, make whatever you choose, and I'll love it. Anyway, that's just my own personal preference, but I enjoy honoring wherever people are at. Most of my friends are vegan, so I'm eating a vegan diet a lot of the time when I spend time with them, and I love it. It's great. When I have them over, I cook vegan meals, and it's wonderful. Anyway, so the nourishment component is great. And then you have all this time to sleep if you choose. You have usually adventures, opportunities to get out of your comfort zone and for growth, which is another form of nourishment in my opinion. And then you have time to reflect and to meditate and to be still if you wish. So, any way, and then the movement, oh my gosh, the physical movement, the physical practice of yoga, whether it's a more vinyasa, power, flow, or restorative, gentle yin. So you're getting nourishment from all across the board. It's just like everyone could use a yoga retreat in their life on a regular basis. There's nothing like it in my experience.
Yes. I need to go now. Okay, so last two questions. Thank you so much. This has all been such great information for anyone listening. So it's been really a pleasure getting back together with you and having you on and sharing your wisdom and point of view with the world. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And the last two questions related to the podcast that I ask each guest. So if you have, what would one 10-minute tip be for anyone listening that they could do today and start feeling more in balance?
My 10-minute tip is to spend 10 minutes a day being in, seeing, reading, or experiencing the perspective of someone else. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean through social media, although there are opportunities to do that. I mean through a book. It could be through 10 minutes of a documentary, or longer than 10 minutes if you want or have the time, on Netflix, like this, 10 minutes of a podcast, something that is either an avenue you're interested in or perhaps something you have no prior knowledge or experience with. The reason being is we spend an inordinate amount of time in our own minds. Well, all of the time, really. I mean, you're in your mind all day. So how brilliant and how wonderful to just take 10 minutes or longer to try on a perspective or point of view or experience of someone else. But like I said, I think the caveat being, not a mindless scroll through Instagram. If you're someone who very mindfully scrolls, as in, you've cultivated a feed of people that fill you with growth or joy or happiness, that's one thing. But I think we can get lost in social media. And those are other people's worlds and perspectives, sure, but they're like sort of this highlight reel. So perhaps it's, reading an article in National Geographic, or, I just watched this amazing documentary, definitely longer than 10 minutes, but you could take it in 10 minutes at a time, on Netflix called Fish People. And it's just like 6 different individuals around the world whose lives have been transformed by the ocean, and they kind of dive into why that is. And it was just so beautiful. And the first one was my favorite, I think. She's a free diver, so she scuba dives down to 100 feet without any gear on a single breath. And she's been doing it since she was a kid, and that just blew my mind at what's possible for humanity. And this is normal in her life, and I can barely get in the ocean without feeling a little bit nervous about being there, let alone dive down. So those moments, at least for me, help remind me of the giant interconnected web that is the world, and to sort of get less hyper focus on my own perceived issues or struggles or problems. And then also a lot of times serves to inspire me, to remind me of there is no limit to what's possible, to potential, that my experience of the world is this tiny, teeny, tiny grain of sand in the grand scheme. And so there's always more to look at and to explore. So I love that. 10 minutes getting in someone else's world or perspective could be super useful.
I love that. Super cool tip. Thank you. And then finally, how do you find balance? What does balance look like to you?
This is a great question, because when I was in my formative years, so let's say, 8 through college, I was very much in the energy of my spirit animal, the hummingbird, of go, 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 do, very fast pace in college, double major, part-time job, usually in some sort of relationship, lots of good friends, vibrant social life, volunteer hours, this place or that place, right? So lots going on, and wanting to have straight A's in all of my classes, not because I knew the content so well of what the class was offering, but because it was some trophy to me, or it mattered somehow to have those grades. So when I graduated college is really when I dove into yoga, and I started with aerial yoga and then eventually broadened into mat yoga and all that came with that. All of a sudden, my life took a 180 in terms of pace, and I found myself spending hours a day walking along the beach, reading, contemplating, doing yoga. I wasn't working full time. I wasn't making very much money, but I had all this free time. And then I didn't like making plans or knowing that I had to be somewhere. Like, it was just the opposite. And so thankfully I've come back to a middle ground, and it feels really great to be here. And I know both sides now because of those experiences. So for me, finding balance has been recognizing that equal parts of action mode, of social mode, but also clear schedule mode, calm, time for meditation, time where I don't have something planned, that I'm not intending to fill with a plan, that's going to stay open for whatever I feel in that moment. That's been one of the hardest things to build into my schedule. But when I do it, it feels incredible. Like Sundays are usually a day for that. I don't have anything planned. I'm not going to make a set plan with anyone or even indicate that I might, right? I'll just be like, no, I'm busy to other people, knowing that I've set aside this time for myself. And that's hard, right? Because then invitations will come through or things I want to do. And sometimes I'm like, that sounds so compelling, I'm going to do it. But when I actually get to a Sunday, for example, that I haven't planned anything for, and I wake up, and one of my recent things that I found I just find myself doing that I really enjoy, and actually it happened a little bit this morning before I came over here, I was telling you about it, is going to a neighborhood that I don't live in and just walking around. I did this in North Park a while back. Mostly actually that day was because I knew I wanted to go to the used bookstore there. But I had I think a 5-hour window of time, and I only had one thing that I needed to do, which was go to that bookstore. And so I was like, oh, well, we're to be in North Park, I'll just see what happens. And it was so fun. I found all these new little places to eat or drink tea at, fun shops, a super cool secondhand or thrift store that had beautiful clothes. And I could just be there as long as I wanted. I didn't have 30 minutes and then I have to find my car again. So that was really healing. So balance to me, I guess, is equal parts of this is when I'm working, this is when I'm taking action steps, this is when I'm building my business, this is when I'm connecting with other people purposefully, intentionally, and then these are the times just for me. And if it so happens that means walking on the beach for a few hours, great. If it means wandering around a neighborhood, great. If it means planning a trip and aligning my soul with something, great. If it means I actually really need to hustle to get this workshop ready to go, then that's fine too. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been very enlightening, and I hope everyone listening are inspired. And it's been just really wonderful having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I hope to chat with you soon.
Thank you again, Zoe, for taking the time to be on the show and for sharing your wisdom and tips with the world. And thank you at home for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Yoga for Balance podcast wherever you listen, and help the show grow by leaving a star rating and review while you're there. Until next time, namaste.